Hey guys, tonight we begin our journey on a rocky island in the Mediterranean, where salt-laced breezes brush through olive groves, and the cries of goats mix with French and Italian curses shouted across hilly streets. You're not yet Napoleon the Emperor, not even close. Right now, you're just a cranky baby with a strong jaw and stronger opinions, swaddled in a modest home on Corsica, an island that had only recently been yanked away from Genoa and awkwardly handed to France like an unwanted birthday gift. The year is 1769 and Corsica is still bristling from its annexation. So are you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. I love seeing that. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born Napoleon Bonaparte, 5th out of 13 children. Your father, Carlo, is a minor noble, trying to stay relevant by switching allegiances faster than a squirrel in a hailstorm. Your mother, Letizia, is the real general, managing a chaotic household while heavily pregnant during a literal war. She'll live through all of this and outlive most of her children too. You, however, seem born under a twitchy star. From the start, you're too smart for your britches and too Corsican for polite French society. Your early education is a patchwork of Latin prayers, grim French primers, and getting smacked by nuns. At age 9, you're sent to the French mainland to attend military school, essentially exiled from your island at an age when most kids are just figuring out hopscotch. You're mocked relentlessly by Parisian boys for your accent, your cheap clothes, and your Corsican pride. One older student nicknames you the Little Arab, which you do not appreciate. You stew quietly, write angsty letters home, and develop a lifelong habit of clenching your jaw when angry. That jaw will eventually appear on coins, busts, and propaganda posters. For now, it just gets sore a lot. Despite the teasing, you take refuge in books, especially history. You adore tales of Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, not so much for their glory, but for how decisively they got things done. You also enjoy math, which you'll later use to calculate artillery trajectories with unnerving precision. Historians still argue whether your military genius was innate or honed from pure spite. Either way, you're already planning how to reshape the world. Corsica remains your emotional tether. You dream of freeing it from France, becoming its liberator, and writing long-winded manifestos under a fig tree. These dreams will age poorly. By your teens, you've already betrayed Corsican independence in favor of French commissions. It turns out dreams are easier to abandon than a good uniform. Life in military school is bleak, cold halls, tasteless soup, shoes that never fit. You eat too fast, talk too little, and walk like someone expecting a duel. You're awarded a commission at 16, barely old enough to grow sideburns, and posted as a second lieutenant in an artillery regiment. This is where your romance with cannons begins. You treat artillery pieces like elegant chess pieces, tools of both science and dominance. You name them in your head, you calculate their recoil, and dream of rearranging enemy lines like furniture. By now, you've stopped writing home about Corsica's future. Instead, you send curt notes asking for money, occasionally peppered with passive-aggressive lines about hunger and ambition. You still feel out of place in France, too Italian for the army mess, too French for Corsican politics, but you are learning how to play people like cards. One time, during a training exercise, you critique a superior officer's strategy so thoroughly and bluntly that you get demoted. Another time, you stare down a superior until he stammers and leaves mid-conversation. Your reputation builds. quiet, intense, unnerving. Someone notes you never laugh unless it's at someone else's expense. You'll carry that vibe for life. Still, you're nobody yet. Just a frustrated young man with sharp elbows, an obsession with control, and a growing awareness that revolutions might be less about ideals, and more about timing. And wouldn't you know it, France is about to explode. You arrive in mainland France with Corsican dirt still stuck to your boots, and a chip on your shoulder that could be used to reinforce a fort wall. At Brienne-le-Château Military School, life is brutal in the precise way that only institutions for teenage boys can be: cold uniforms, colder showers, and an endless cascade of social hierarchies that put your strange accent and austere manners at the bottom. You speak French technically, but with a Corsican growl that makes you sound like you're chewing gravel. Your classmates, mostly sons of richer nobility, whisper and giggle behind your back. One of them calls you Puss in Boots because of your heavy-lidded eyes and swaggering strut. You're constantly defensive, often brooding, and developing what scholars now call your performance-based grudge aura, LRE. But even now, there's something about you, an aura, a magnetism. You walk fast, think faster, and memorize books with surgical speed. You prefer solitude. While the other boys play cards and flirt with the daughters of visiting inspectors, you scribble out treatises on tyranny, strategy, and the moral virtue of ancient Rome. Your writing is dramatic and borderline unhinged, but the staff take note. One instructor says, "He's always aiming for something, though God knows what." You are transferred to the École Militaire in Paris, one of the top military academies. It should be a big deal. It's not. You arrive during a food shortage and have to complete a 2-year course in one. Your father dies right around this time, leaving the family in debt. You don't cry. You do, however, write a curt letter to your mother reminding her to send your younger siblings into clerical training so they won't starve. In Paris, you walk past bread riots and ignore them. You watch powdered aristocrats sip wine like nothing's wrong. You file it all away in your mental artillery vault, calculating where each social class sits on the chessboard. Your professors admire your math skills and artillery precision. You graduate faster than anyone expected, partly due to brains, partly due to budget cuts. The French army, you learn, will take anyone who can keep a cannon from exploding in their face. You're posted to Valence, a sleepy garrison town where your greatest battles involve boredom, billiards, and budget wine. You write novellas on ancient Carthage and start a melodramatic romance with a local girl named Caroline who dumps you for someone with better grooming. You take this heartbreak the way you take everything, dramatically. You write poetry. You sulk. You get promoted anyway. Then, the French Revolution hits like a thunderclap through stained glass. Heads start rolling. Aristocrats vanish like mist. Streets that once echoed with opera now thunder with the chants of citizen mobs. You, a minor artillery officer with few friends and fewer scruples, see your chance. Despite your noble birth, you pledge loyalty to the Republic. It's a strategic decision. You know which way the wind's blowing. You start wearing your hair shorter, your boots shinier, and practicing a more plebeian tone. You even pronounce your name differently, smoothing out the Italian edges to become more acceptably French. Napoleon Bonaparte. Your first big test comes in Corsica, of all places. You return, hoping to rally your old homeland to the revolutionary cause. You end up nearly lynched. The independence movement there, led by Pasquale Paoli, a man you once idolized, considers you a traitor. You and your family barely escape with your lives. Corsica is no longer home. It never really was. Back on the mainland, you drift between assignments, always on the fringes of real power. You write essays on how to fix France. No one reads them. You fantasize about revolutionizing military structure. No one listens. You begin studying maps with religious fervor, memorizing terrain like a lover's body. In 1793, your moment arrives. At the Siege of Toulon, a major port city held by Royalists and their British allies, the French forces are stuck. You, just 24 and full of barely restrained opinions, suggest a plan involving some bold artillery placements and a nighttime assault. You're given a chance. The plan works, spectacularly. The British flee. Toulon falls. You are promoted to brigadier general. It is the first time your name appears in major newspapers, and just like that, you're not background noise anymore. But fame brings enemies. Soon after Toulon, you're arrested for being too close to certain radical revolutionaries. You're tossed in jail for a few days, your career hanging by a thread. You respond the way any future emperor would, by calmly planning which ministers to blackmail if you survive. And you do survive, because France is too chaotic to hold grudges for long. The year is 1795, and Paris is once again rioting, this time against the revolutionary government itself. Someone needs to defend the city, someone with artillery experience. A certain tall, powdered general says, "Give the Corsican the guns." You accept. You place cannons at key crossroads, load them with grapeshot, and wait. The mob charges. You give the order. The street echoes with the first truly Napoleonic moment, a whiff of grapeshot, as it's later called, tearing through revolutionaries like confetti at a tragic parade. It's brutal, efficient, over in minutes. You save the government. You are promoted again, this time to Major General, and offered command of the Army of Italy. You are 26. You have no money, no famous name, and a wardrobe full of badly mended uniforms. But you're about to conquer Europe. You now command the Army of Italy, which sounds glamorous until you meet it. Your soldiers are underfed, underpaid, and mostly shoeless. Their weapons are ancient, their morale subterranean. One officer mutters, "We are an army in name only." You smile thinly and say, "Then we shall rename victory itself." At just 26, you're small, pale, and weirdly intense. But from your very first speech, the troops get it. You tell them, "Soldiers, you are naked and ill-fed. The government owes you much but can give you nothing. I will lead you into the most fertile plains on earth. There you will find honor, glory, and riches." Translation: We're going to win or we're going to loot. Maybe both. It works. In the spring of 1796, you march into northern Italy with a ragged column and a ridiculous amount of confidence. What follows is a blur of lightning maneuvers, impossible river crossings, and a kind of war choreography that leaves your Austrian enemies blinking at their maps in disbelief. You move like smoke, always ahead of your supply lines, always in the enemy's blind spot. At Lodi, you lead a bold charge across a bridge under fire. Some say it's mythologized later. Others swear you did it just to impress the soldiers. Either way, after Lodi, your men start calling you the Little Corporal, a weirdly affectionate title that means our scary pint-sized miracle worker. This campaign becomes your audition tape for immortality. You win not just with guns, but with words. After every battle, you pen gloriously exaggerated bulletins and send them to Parisian newspapers. The Austrians were swept from the field like chaff before the wind. Never mind that some of your battles were messy, Pyrrhic affairs, it's the headline that matters. You become the revolution's poster boy, young, scrappy, victorious, and just ambiguous enough in your politics to appeal to everyone. The Directory, the floundering five-man executive running France, starts treating you like a golden goose. You're kept at arm's length, admired but not trusted. You know this. You smile anyway. While rampaging through Italy, you discover art, not as a connoisseur, but as a plunderer with taste. You send paintings, statues, and crates of treasure back to Paris, gifts from liberated cities. The Louvre is filling up thanks to your canon and your charisma. You sign treaties with trembling Italian dukes and parade through cities as if rehearsing for Rome itself. But you're not just looting. You're reorganizing Italy. You create sister republics, install friendly leaders, and even draft new constitutions. It's part idealism, part imperial dress rehearsal. You tell people you're spreading liberty. You also install secret police and raise taxes. The locals are confused. They cheer, then riot, then cheer again. Meanwhile, your letters to Paris grow increasingly theatrical. You write the directory things like, "I am the revolution incarnate," and "Do not send me orders, I send events." They don't know whether to promote you again or quietly poison your wine. Back in France, rumors swirl. Women swoon. Newspapers publish your bulletins next to sketches of your serious little face and battlefield poses. You're becoming a national crush, short, mysterious, oddly magnetic. A new myth is taking root. Napoleon the genius, the chosen one, the unstoppable storm in boots. You return from Italy a hero, trailing victory and wagons full of Renaissance loot. Parisians line the streets to watch you ride in, your hand tucked in your coat, your jaw set like you're daring someone to question your greatness. They don't. Instead, you're offered command of an army to invade Britain. You decline. Instead, you propose something absurd. Let's go invade Egypt. France needs to hurt Britain's global trade, you argue. And Egypt is the back door to India. Also, you say, it is a land of marvels. Translation: I've always wanted to see pyramids and pretend I'm Caesar. The Directory, desperate to get you out of town before you stage a coup, agrees. In 1798, you set sail with 400 ships and over 50,000 men, also aboard. Scientists, mathematicians, engineers, and enough ambition to fill the Nile. You are now not just a general, but an explorer, a conqueror, a man auditioning to rewrite the map. You land in Alexandria. You march toward Cairo. You fight the Mamluks at the Battle of the Pyramids. The sun glares down. Your men melt in the heat. You give a speech pointing to the ancient monuments and declare, "Soldiers, from atop these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you." Nobody knows if they understood what you meant. But they win. Egypt is a strange, complicated chapter. You defeat local forces quickly, but then lose your fleet to the British at the Battle of the Nile. Your men get dysentery. The locals revolt. You install new laws. You study mummies. You almost die from plague. You declare yourself a friend of Islam. You print propaganda in Arabic. Historians still argue whether this campaign was visionary, delusional, or both. But your scientists make real discoveries. They document ancient ruins, launch hot air balloons, and most famously stumble across the Rosetta Stone. It will take decades to decode, but it's a small moment of intellectual glory amid military confusion. Then, as Egypt unravels, you do something very Napoleonic. You abandon your army. Without warning, you sneak onto a ship and sail back to France, citing urgent national business. Most of your soldiers will be stranded for years. Some will die. You will never mention this in your memoirs. You return to Paris to find the Directory even weaker, the economy worse, and public trust at rock bottom. Perfect. You've won wars, bent geography, dazzled scientists, and now, finally, you're ready to take power. You arrive back in Paris like a hurricane wearing polished boots. It's October 1799, and France is exhausted, broke, leaderless, and hungry for someone, anyone, who can keep the lights on and the neighbors out. That someone is you. You strut through salons and government halls in your trademark style. Stiff posture, dramatic silence, hand permanently tucked inside your coat like you're hiding a secret or a sandwich. You speak little, but when you do, people lean in. You've mastered the art of the pause. You look at people like they've already disappointed you. The directory is falling apart. Everyone knows it. Half the country is whispering about royalist uprisings. The other half is longing for guillotines again. In this mess, you are calm, precise, and absolutely plotting something. The coup is almost boring in its success. You stage it on the 18th of Brumaire, date no one can ever remember except historians and that one guy at your dinner party who's a little too into calendars. With the help of your brother Lucian and a few conveniently placed grenadiers, you march into the legislative chambers, shout a few angry words, have some politicians arrested, and voila, democracy is replaced by something more Napoleonic. You do not call yourself king. That would be gauche. Instead, you become first consul, which sounds temporary but very much isn't. You set up a new constitution, written mostly by you, and pass it via referendum. It's approved by an overwhelming majority, although no one asks how the votes were counted. The French people are tired of chaos. You offer order. They take the deal. Your new regime is sleek, centralized, and very, very efficient. You reform the legal code, launch infrastructure projects, and make sure no loaf of bread is ever without a government-stamped flour permit. You found the Bank of France. You remake education. You create the Legion of Honor. You reward merit so long as merit also likes you. Meanwhile, you carefully control the press. Newspapers are trimmed like bonsai trees only allowed to grow in approved directions. Satire is discouraged. Dissent is suspicious. You smile a lot in portraits. But you're not just a bureaucrat in uniform. You're still a general at heart. Austria gets restless again, and you grab your sword like an old friend. In 1800, you launch another campaign into Italy, crossing the Alps dramatically, though you actually take the easier pass, and only later commission that famous painting of you on a rearing horse, looking like war's fashionable cousin. At Marengo, you're nearly crushed by Austrian forces. You arrive late to the battlefield and find your troops already halfway through losing, but you rally, you redirect reserves, you turn retreat into attack. By nightfall, you win. Barely. It doesn't matter. The newspapers say it was a masterpiece. Your legend grows. You're no longer just a man, you're momentum in boots. And now you start reshaping France in your image. You standardize everything from street signage to school textbooks. Your face appears on coins, medals, snuff boxes. Even your enemies start dressing a little like you. Your government is built on speed and spectacle, efficient governance, mixed with just enough ceremony to remind people who's boss. At home, you live in a whirlwind of candles, velvet, and paper. You sleep irregularly, eat fast, and pace constantly. You dictate letters while bathing. You quiz ministers at 3 a.m. You sign treaties while getting your hair brushed. You don't just multitask, you multithrust. You marry Yosh Fine, an older widow with dazzling charm, terrible finances, and a Parisian social web that helps stabilize your early regime. She introduces you to silk wallpaper and mild emotional chaos. You love her wildly. She cheats on you casually. You forgive her for now. Internationally, you play chess with entire nations. You sign peace with Britain in 1802, temporarily. You write letters to Tsar Alexander full of brotherly charm and implied threats. You reoccupy territories with the grace of a cat knocking glasses off a table. You sell Louisiana to the United States, because honestly, what are you going to do with all that swamp? By 1804, the people want more than a consul. They want certainty. And so, you do the most imperial thing possible. You crown yourself emperor. Yes, yourself. In a grand ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral, the Pope is there, dressed in gold and looking vaguely confused. Tradition says the Pope crowns the monarch. You, very famously, take the crown from his hands and place it on your own head. The message is clear. You are not chosen by God, you are your own destiny. Yosh Fine is crowned empress beside you, resplendent in diamonds and nerves. You have just turned the revolution full circle, from monarchy to republic to a brand new monarchy, but this time with better uniforms. And now, all of Europe is watching. Some in awe. Most in dread. You have reshaped France. Next, you will reshape the continent. You are now Emperor of the French, which sounds extravagant and historically weighty, because it is. But you're not resting on a velvet throne. You're pacing, always pacing. The crown is just another piece of strategy, like a well-placed cannon or an ominous silence in a negotiation. Europe isn't going to conquer itself. You look at the map and see an unfinished puzzle. Austria is brooding. Prussia is pouting. Russia is sharpening bayonets in the snow. Britain is mocking you from across the channel with its uninvadable smugness and seemingly infinite navy. Your ambition is not just to win wars, but to end them so thoroughly that no one dares pick up a musket again. First, the Third Coalition. Britain, Austria, and Russia band together in 1805 to put an end to your rise. They call it a balance of power. You call it an invitation. You march east, fast and furious, covering ground at speeds that make generals blink. Your troops, now hardened and fanatically loyal, call your sudden movements the Emperor's breath. At Ulm, you trap an Austrian army without firing a shot. Thousands surrender. You don't gloat, you move on. And then Austerlitz. It is December 2nd, 1805, your first anniversary as emperor. You face a larger combined Austro-Russian force. The battlefield is foggy, the ground icy. You study the terrain like it's a chessboard. You let the Allies think they've flanked you. You lure them in, then you strike. It's a masterpiece. The fog lifts. Your troops hammer the enemy center. Russian cavalry breaks. Austrians scatter. By the end of the day, the coalition is shattered. You tour the field in eerie silence, the bodies steaming in the cold light. You send a letter to Empress Yosh Fine. I have defeated the Russians and Austrians by myself. I am a little tired. Austerlitz earns you continental dominance and a headache, because now everyone wants revenge. The Holy Roman Empire dissolves. You redraw borders, install loyal rulers, often your brothers, and create a patchwork of puppet states across Europe. The Napoleonic Code, your legal gift to posterity, is implemented across these regions, blending liberty with surveillance, reform with quiet autocracy. You start collecting crowns like souvenirs. You name your brother Joseph King of Naples, then later Spain. Your brother Louis becomes King of Holland. You try to make Jerome behave in Westphalia. It's like giving out thrones at a chaotic family reunion. Some of them do okay. Others create diplomatic incidents involving swans, debt, or both. But Britain still looms. You can't touch them at sea. Your navy, always your weak point, is led by sailors who squint at compasses and hope for the best. At Trafalgar in 1805, your fleet is annihilated by Admiral Nelson. France loses 22 ships. Britain loses none. It's a disaster wrapped in cannon smoke. You pretend it didn't happen. So you change tactics. If you can't beat Britain militarily, you'll strangle it economically. Enter the Continental System, a sweeping embargo designed to block British goods from all European ports under your control. It's bold, it's elegant, It's impossible to enforce. Smugglers flourish like weeds. Black markets bloom. British textiles still find their way into Paris via leaky boats, bribed officials, and entrepreneurial goats. Portugal refuses to join the blockade. You respond by invading Spain to get to Portugal. This backfires. In 1808, you send your brother Joseph to rule Spain. The Spanish people promptly start a vicious guerrilla war that bleeds your army dry. You call it a scratch. It becomes a wound that never quite heals. Meanwhile, your marriage, less a romance than a strategic alliance, starts to strain. You and Yosh Fine adore each other in bursts, but she cannot produce an heir. You delay, you dither. Eventually, you make the hardest decision of your personal life. You divorce her in 1810. It's strangely tender. You hold her hand during the announcement. You cry. She cries. The court cries. Then you marry Marie Louise of Austria, a teenage archduchess who is horrified but obedient. You now have a Habsburg wife. Your enemies are choking on their powdered wigs. A year later, you have a son. You name him Napoleon Francois Joseph Charles Bonaparte. He is given the title King of Rome. You call him the Eaglet. You order 101 cannon shots to celebrate. You try not to imagine how many shots it will take to keep him on any throne. By now, Europe is mostly reshaped in your image. From the Atlantic to the Vistula, your codes, taxes, calendars, and censored newspapers march in lockstep. Roads are better. Laws are cleaner. Feudalism is wheezing its last breath. But peace? Not quite. Prussia rebuilds. Russia grows wary. The British keep funding every anti-Napoleon coalition like it's a Kickstarter with unlimited coins. Still, for a moment, the continent bends to your will. You dine in golden halls, pace marble corridors, and receive gifts from Persia and Siam. You wear silk-lined uniforms and give long, sleepy speeches about virtue and victory. You are feared. You are admired. You are lonely. And you're starting to believe your own myth, which is when everything begins to slip. It's 1812, and you've got one more grand idea: Russia. Yes, Russia. Vast, cold, unwieldy Russia. You've already beaten Austria, bullied Prussia, and tried to suffocate Britain. Russia is the last major piece of the puzzle that won't click into place. Tsar Alexander I once called you brother, but now he's ignoring your letters and quietly trading with the British, an unforgivable betrayal. You prepare a warning. Except your version of a warning is an invasion with over 600,000 troops. They call it the Grand Armée, and it is. Soldiers from every corner of your empire. French, Poles, Italians, Germans, even reluctant Austrians. An army so large that it bends the roads, devours supplies, and stretches across Europe like a living shadow. You cross the Niemen River in June, confident, grim, and wearing a custom gray overcoat. Always that coat. You say nothing dramatic. You don't need to. The numbers say it for you. But Russia isn't playing by your rules. They don't line up neatly to be defeated. They retreat, always retreating. They burn their own villages. They poison wells. They leave nothing behind. You march deeper, faster, angrier into a land that doesn't want to be won. Summer is blistering. Roads become rivers of dust. Horses drop. Men hallucinate. Supplies vanish into bureaucratic voids. But you press on, convinced that one decisive victory will bring Alexander to heel. In September, you reach Borodino. It's the bloodiest single-day battle in your career. Over 70,000 casualties. The Russians stand their ground for hours before retreating, as planned. You take the field, but it's not a victory, it's a warning in smoke. Still, Moscow lies ahead. You enter the city expecting surrender. What you find is silence. The Russians have evacuated. Then they set it on fire. You walk through Moscow's charred ruins like Caesar in a ghost town. The wind howls through blackened churches, ash drifts like snow, no envoys come, no treaty is offered. You wait. 1 week, 2, 5. Winter arrives. Ah yes, Russian winter, romantic in poetry, lethal in reality. Snow falls like a guillotine, horses freeze where they stand, men light fires inside tents and never wake up. Frostbite turns fingers into porcelain, your supply lines collapse, your maps mean nothing, even the ravens look judgmental. And then you retreat. It is chaos. Wagons tip, roads disappear, soldiers stagger like ghosts, every village is hostile, every hill a death trap, the Grand Armée disintegrates. Starvation, hypothermia, wolves, yes, actual wolves rip through the remnants. Your elite imperial guard carries you across frozen rivers like an exhausted father at a carnival gone terribly wrong. Of the original 600,000, fewer than 100,000 limp out of Russia. And even they are broken. You say little in public. In private you weep. You lock yourself in rooms for hours. When questioned by a minister, you mutter, "From the sublime to the ridiculous is but a step." Europe smells blood. The Sixth Coalition forms, Prussia, Austria, Russia, Sweden, Britain, all dancing on your empire's grave before it's even dug. They push west while your forces try to regroup. But something in you refuses to yield. In 1813 at Leipzig, the Battle of the Nations, you fight one of the largest battles in history. You lose. Slowly, heroically, desperately, you lose anyway. Your allies peel away. Betrayal becomes routine. Your German satellites defect. Your brother in Spain has already lost his throne. Your stepson flees. Your marshals whisper. Your generals stall. By 1814, the war comes to France. They breach your borders. They march toward Paris. You lead a final, brilliant campaign beating larger armies in quick succession, playing cat and mouse with whole coalitions. Your genius still burns. But it's not enough. Paris falls. The Senate turns against you. Your most loyal marshals beg you to abdicate. You do. You write the proclamation with shaking hands, naming your toddler son as your successor, Napoleon II, King of Rome. You dream that your legacy might survive in the boy's chubby fists. No one takes the offer seriously. You are exiled to Elba, a Mediterranean island so small that you can walk across it in a day, and you do frequently, fuming, planning, brooding. You are given the title Emperor of Elba, which is both official and hilarious. You reorganize the island, pave roads, reform the post office, teach fishers how to fish better. Locals adore you. You wear your faded uniform and throw the occasional ball. But Europe isn't done with you. And you're not done with it. You spend only 10 months on Elba, though the world assumes you'll stay forever. Exiled monarchs are supposed to fade, write dreary memoirs, cultivate orchids, and slowly become footnotes. You have other plans. You watch Europe closely from your island vantage point. Louis XVIII, the restored Bourbon King of France, is boring the populace to tears with creaky old customs and powdered wigs. The people grumble, the army murmurs. Your name, whispered in barracks and CAFS, still draws reverent nods. So you wait. And then, when spring breaks, when the time feels just fragile enough, you leave. On February 26, 1815, you slip away with a handful of loyal soldiers on a tiny ship named the Inconstant. You bring a modest army, a few cannons, some hay, and an audacity so thick it could block musket fire. Your destination, France. As you sail north, your fate hangs on whispers. You land near Cannes and begin the boldest road trip in history. No disguises, no subterfuge, just a steady march northward, a growing trail of deserters, and your name spoken like a spell. Troops sent to arrest you, defect. One officer greets you with a loaded pistol. You step forward and say, "If any of you will shoot your emperor, here I am." No one shoots. They join you. By the time you reach Lyon, you have an army again. Paris panics. Louis XVIII flees without even finishing his second breakfast. You enter the capital to thunderous cheers. You've done it. In 20 days. This becomes known as the 100 Days. You're back on the throne, and everyone is flabbergasted. You move quickly, reforming the government, issuing progressive decrees, calling for peace. You speak of liberty, constitutional rights, and brotherhood. It's a softer Napoleon, or at least a cleverer one. But Europe isn't listening. The Seventh Coalition forms before you've even changed out of your travel uniform. Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia prepare for war. Again. You know they won't wait. So you strike first. June 1815. You march north to confront the Allies in Belgium. Your goal, divide them before they unite. You move with veteran speed, flanking the Prussians at Ligny and forcing them to retreat, one piece down. Now, on to the British. June 18th, the Battle of Waterloo. You face the Duke of Wellington, a cool, defensive strategist with strong cheekbones and excellent cavalry. The battlefield is slick from rain. Mud clogs your artillery. Timing falters. Messages misfire. It's a bad day for miracles. Still, you nearly win. Wellington holds a ridge near the village of Waterloo. You hammer it all day with infantry and cavalry. You order your Imperial Guard forward, the old, reliable elite. For a moment, it feels like Austerlitz again. But then, Prussian reinforcements arrive. The tide turns. Your army collapses. Waterloo is not just a loss. It is an end, a sharp, humiliating full stop. Your marshals beg you to flee. You do. You rush back to Paris, desperate to spin, rally anything. But this time, no one follows. You abdicate, again. This time, there's no Elba. The British take custody of you, and choose a new exile, an island even farther away, more isolated, more final. St. Helena. Middle of the South Atlantic. No escape. They give you a small house at Longwood, damp, wind-blasted, surrounded by cliffs and British guards. The walls mold, the windows rattle. It rains sideways. You're 46, but your body feels 76. The headaches are constant, your stomach churns. You wear the same green uniform nearly every day, like a relic of someone who mattered. Still, you keep routines. You dictate your memoirs. You walk for hours in circles. You name rocks after battles. You quarrel with your British jailers, whom you find petty and suspicious. You play cards. You write letters no one answers. Occasionally, ships pass on the horizon. You watch them. And wonder. St. Helena is not a tragic island. It is a tedious one. There are no grand vistas, no romantic storms, just endless gray skies, stubborn weeds, and a wind that seems personally offended by your presence. You, the former emperor of half of Europe, are now living in a house smaller than your old war tent. Longwood, your residence, is perched on a plateau that manages to be damp and dusty at the same time. The wallpaper peels, the furniture creaks, the tea is always lukewarm. You pace the same 50 yards of garden until the grass wears into a rut. You once danced through Europe, now you rehearse solitude. Your entourage is small. A few loyal officers, a valet, a cook, and a corset of British guards watching every move. You're supposed to have freedom on the island, but only freedom within fences. Even your letters are opened before they're sent. The governor, Sir Hudson Lowe, becomes your personal nemesis. Stiff, suspicious, and immune to your usual charm. You insult him in 3 languages, but he remains immovable. Each day blurs into the next. You rise late, wear your old uniform jacket like a robe, and drift through routines: breakfast, walk, dictation, nap, dinner, cards, nightmares, repeat. You begin dictating your memoirs, slowly at first, then with increasing urgency. You speak into the damp air as if addressing posterity directly. You remember every campaign, every betrayal, every piece of gossip from a French ballroom in 1802. You write of your victories with grandeur and your defeats with careful footnotes. A new Napoleon emerges, part philosopher, part martyr, part misunderstood prophet of modernity. To your listeners, faithful scribes and restless companions, you are a fallen titan, reshaping history one anecdote at a time. To your British captors, you are an endless security risk with an allergy to rules. You rarely speak of your son. The boy Napoleon II the Eaglet is in Vienna, a guest prisoner of the Austrian court. You send him letters, they're intercepted. You send gifts, they're returned. You imagine him growing up in marble corridors, told bedtime stories in which you are the villain. You never see him again. Your health falters. You gain weight, your skin grows sallow. You begin experiencing intense abdominal pain. The doctors debate: is it an ulcer, liver disease, stomach cancer? Historians still argue. Whatever it is, it gnaws at you steadily. You stay sharp, mentally at least. You read voraciously. You write lists of hypothetical reforms. You design imaginary battle campaigns with rocks on a chessboard. You correct your cook's seasoning, then rewrite the code civil in your head. Sometimes you sit alone at sunset and speak to no one. You wonder, not dramatically, but idly, if it was worth it. The wars, the titles, the betrayals. You miss Paris, you miss strategy, you miss motion. And yet, you do not regret. You often say, "What is history but a fable agreed upon?" You intend to be the author of your own fable. Visitors occasionally arrive, explorers, dignitaries, the curious. Some expect a monster, others a genius. They leave with stories of a tired man with sharp eyes and a cracked teacup. You offer them anecdotes and parables, always with a moral that points back to your vision of France, of power, of how the world should have listened. One day you collapse. The pain grows unbearable. Your strength fades. You take to your bed, refusing priests, then calling them back, then refusing again. You argue theology with a British surgeon while vomiting blood. Your last days are riddled with confusion, philosophy, and a desire for clean sheets. On May 5, 1821, you die. The room is silent, except for the wind rattling the shutters. Your last words reportedly are, "France, the army, head of the army, Josh Fine." The empire dies with a sigh. You are buried on the island, under a plain tombstone. No name. The British refuse to write Napoleon on it, too dangerous. Even in death, your name threatens to resurrect ideas. And yet, you do not stay forgotten. In 1840, your remains are exhumed and returned to France in a grand ceremony. Parisians line the streets. Soldiers weep. You are interred beneath the golden dome of Les Invalides in Paris, where your sarcophagus sits today like a monument to ego, ambition, and the strange poetry of human power. They say empires fall. But legends just take naps. You may be dead, but you're not done. The echoes of your life ripple outward through politics, law, literature, even fashion. Your shadow stretches across Europe like a forgotten thunderclap. In the decades after your death, France becomes a revolving door of monarchies, empires, and fragile republics. Each new regime tries to claim or reject your legacy, usually both. They ban your name, then reinstate it. They denounce your wars, then parade your victories. Eventually, your nephew Louis Napoleon Bonaparte rides the wave of your memory all the way to the presidency, and then, in classic family fashion, crowns himself Emperor Napoleon III. You taught them well. Your Napoleonic Code, a tidy little volume of legal wisdom written during your peak of power, becomes your most durable conquest. Countries across Europe adopt it or copy it, even places you never visited, like Latin America or parts of the Middle East, use versions of it. You have colonized jurisprudence. And your name, it becomes more than a name. Napoleon enters the global lexicon as a shorthand for ambition, brilliance, and a touch of megalomania. People name their sons after you. Dogs, too. Historians write volumes. Novelists swoon. Psychologists invent a syndrome, Napoleon complex, to explain short men with tall egos, though ironically, you weren't particularly short for your time. Artists paint you crossing the Alps, glowing with divine wind. Musicians compose operas about your rise. Filmmakers cast actors with enormous cheekbones to brood silently in candlelight. You are reimagined 1,000 times over hero, tyrant, reformer, lunatic. The truth is probably all of these things, stirred together with equal parts cunning and caffeine. You become a symbol. But symbols aren't always convenient. In World War I, your name is whispered in French trenches as a reminder of glory. In World War II, Hitler studies your Russian campaign and crucially learns nothing. Soviet historians reframe you as a proto-capitalist villain. British scholars keep calling you a Corsican upstart, still bitter about 1805. And in Paris, tourists line up to visit your tomb, unsure if they should feel reverence, regret, or just admiration for the dome. Meanwhile, your son, the boy you hoped would carry your legacy, dies young. Tuberculosis takes him before he ever sees a battlefield. He grows up polite, well-read, and carefully monitored, like a valuable hostage on display. The eaglet never flies. But your myth, that takes wing. In schools, they still teach your battles. In museums, they display your bicorn hat like a crown. In politics, your strategy manuals are quietly passed around between meetings. Your life becomes a blueprint for how to seize power and a cautionary tale for what happens when you hold on too long. In Corsica, they preserve your birthplace. In Elba, they preserve your residence. In St. Helena, they preserve your prison. 3 islands, 3 chapters of the same myth. And somehow, the ordinary parts of you become just as fascinating. How you liked cologne and hated drafts, how you bathed in rose water, wrote with tiny pens, and had nightmares about betrayal. How you took 3 sugars in your tea unless distracted. How you feared the sea but crossed it anyway. Even now, scholars can't agree on you. Some call you a military genius, others a warmongering despot. Some admire your reforms, others wince at your censorship. You are a riddle with a bayonet. And for every critic, there's a dreamer. A young cadet reading about Austerlitz, a lawyer quoting the Napoleonic Code, a writer crafting a hero whose flaw is wanting too much, too fast, too boldly. You are proof that history isn't just about what happened, it's about what we remember. And what we choose to believe. The candle dims, but the legend lingers. You, Napoleon Bonaparte, became a prism through which the world learned to examine power, how it's won, how it slips, and what it leaves behind. You didn't invent ambition, but you gave it a wardrobe, a marching rhythm, and a legal code that outlasted your borders. In the quiet decades after your death, your name is whispered less often in fear, more often in fascination. You become the ultimate what if, the dream that a single willful human, with enough discipline, charm, and sheer velocity, could bend history like iron in fire. Your tomb in Les Invalides becomes a pilgrimage site, not just for patriots, but for the curious. They come to gaze at the massive sarcophagus, 6 nested coffins deep, resting under a gold dome meant to remind everyone, this man mattered. Some come expecting grandeur, they find it. Some come expecting tragedy, they find that too. But most leave with a sense of scale, not just of your empire, but of your contradictions. You were a Corsican, who became more French than the French. A soldier who longed for peace, but only on his terms. A revolutionary who crowned himself emperor. You were meticulous and impulsive, romantic and ruthless. You issued medals to peasants and declared kings from your family tree. You believed in merit unless it was inconvenient. You liberated cities and censored newspapers. You said you loved liberty, but mostly when it was marching in your direction. And yet, in your contradictions, you became something timeless. Because human history is not tidy. It is not fair. It is not even particularly logical. It is driven by people like you, restless, relentless, and at times slightly ridiculous. You were a man who could calculate artillery angles in your sleep, but forgot to pack winter coats for Russia. You once told your secretary, "The word impossible is not in my dictionary." He did not point out that it was, in fact, right between impolite and impunity. You lived fast, rose faster, and fell like a comet skipping across the surface of Europe. And in the end, you left us with more than just battle maps and busts. You left us a question. What would we do if given your tools, your intellect, your stage? Would we use it to build, to burn, or something in between? You were not a god. You were not even always good. But you were unforgettable. And now, centuries later, as the world turns and new powers rise, your story still lingers in the margins of textbooks and in the shadows of war rooms. Not as a warning, not as a celebration, but as a reminder that history is made by those who dare to rewrite it. So here you are, drifting gently away from battlefields and marble halls, from powdered wigs and musket fire, from the clatter of boots on cobblestone and the scent of ink on decrees. Let your breath slow. Let the golden dome of Les Invalides fade from view, its glow soft and hazy, like a dream already receding into memory. Picture the shores of Corsica again, olive trees swaying under a sea-salted breeze, goats bleating in the hills, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Somewhere, a child reads aloud from Plutarch, eyes wide with wonder. The pages flutter in the wind. Let that child rest. Let the maps fold. Let the cannons fall silent. History doesn't need to march tonight. It just needs to sleep. Your journey with Napoleon ends not in triumph or exile, but in stillness, in the soft hush of understanding, in the gentle weight of what was. There will be more emperors, more revolutions,